Okay, let's continue where we were talking last time. We were talking about the monotonicity criterion. This is another way of judging, fairness or goodness of the voting systems. Monotonicity, it says, boosting the winner should not change the result. That is to say, the winner should still be the winner if you boost them. And what I mean by that is if one of the voters decides to change their mind in a way which raises that person up in their rankings, if they were going to win, and then somebody says, you know what, I'm going to change my mind and raise them up, then they should still win, right? That's the idea behind the monotonicity criterion. It seems ordinary enough, but it turns out we saw an example of this last time. Actually, the instant runoff voting does not satisfy monotonicity. That's because, well, it's kind of a complicated example, but if you look at your notes from last time, at the end, you will see we had an example where there was going to be somebody who was going to win, and then we changed one of the votes to raise them up in their rankings, and somehow that change caused that person actually to end up losing. So the instant runoff does not satisfy monotonicity. Let me just say, because of this example from last time. All right. I want to talk about the other voting systems. You can add these into your chart. I think maybe you did this already. One of the columns in your chart will say monotonicity, which I'll usually just write as mono. And then we had our different voting systems: the plurality, the Condorcet, the Borda, the IRV, right? And you should put a big old X in that column because the instant runoff does not satisfy the monotonicity. That we talked about last time. I want to talk about the other three there. Do they or do they not satisfy the monotonicity? And these ones are I would say, not so hard to think through. I think any of these three, what we're about to talk about, will make a decent homework or test question. Let's talk about the others. So does plurality satisfy? The monotonicity. This means if somebody was going to win using the plurality system, that is, they had the most votes in the first position, more than anybody else, and then I raise that person up on one of the ballots, are they still going to win? I think the answer is yeah, they're still going to win. If they were already had the most first place votes, and then you raise them up, if anything, you're just going to give them more first place votes, right? Or maybe you're not going to change anything. In any case, they're still going to win. Nobody else is going to win if all you do is raise up the winner. So the answer is yes. Since I imagine, I could ask this on a test question or something. You tell me, does the plurality system satisfy the monotonicity? I'm not asking for you to have memorized the chart. I would ask you to explain why, right? Explain why or why not. For the explain why, I would say yes, since a plurality winner, you have to say something specific about plurality, right? A plurality winner has the most first place votes. And if you boost them up on some of the ballots, then they're still going to have the most first place votes, right? You might have given them more, but you're not giving them less. And so they're still going to have the most first place votes. I'm going to try and write what I just said. Since a plurality winner has the most first place votes, if we boost them, they will still have the most first place votes. You might give them an extra vote, but you're not going to give them less. So, and you're not going to give anybody else anymore. So they will still have the most first place votes, so they still win. That's what you have to explain, right? Why it is that if you boost the winner, they still win. And I hope you are convinced by my brief explanation, all right? Most of the questions that I would ask you on the homework or on the test that involve you writing words, it would be about this much. You don't have to write me a whole big essay here. Just get to the point. I mean, you can write a big essay if you want to. Tell me about your childhood or something. But this is all you need to say, right? And it's actually, in my opinion, better if this is all you say. It means if you say a whole lot of other stuff, that suggests to me that you don't actually understand what you should be focusing on. You're supposed to be focusing on monotonicity, which is about boosting the winner. And you got to say something about the plurality system, which is about how many votes in the first position, right? You don't really need to say anything else. Anyway, this, I put a check. Maybe you already did, right there, right? The plurality does satisfy the monotonicity. All right? Any thoughts about that? Let's talk about the Borda. Can you say similar things about the Borda? You got to think about if somebody's winning with the Borda, which is the one where you add up all the points. If somebody's already winning, that is they have the most points, and then you raise them up, are they still going to be winning? You think about what happens to their points. They get more points if you raise them up, right? And so they're still going to be winning. Maybe you might worry about maybe somebody else could have gained a bunch of points too. The answer is no. You're boosting the winner up. You're not boosting somebody else up. So the winner will just get more points. So actually, I could say almost exactly the same words that I just said here about Borda. So can I just say similar with Borda? Boosting the winner gives them more points, right? So they still win. Great. Again, in your explanation, you have to mention somehow something about boosting the winner, because that's what monotonicity is about. And you also have to mention something about Borda. And where I mentioned something about Borda is when I said more points, right? The Borda is based on points. So that's my sort of specific tie into the Borda system. Anyway, this means I'll put a check here under Borda, or to the right of Borda. All right, the Borda count does satisfy the monotonicity criterion. Boosting somebody up just gives them more points, so they're just going to win even more. All right? And then what about the Condorcet? This one is a little more complicated, I suppose. The Condorcet method, remember, is when you find someone who would win in any one-on-one matchup. That's the Condorcet winner. Think about that, such a person, the Condorcet winner. If you boost them up, are they still going to be the Condorcet winner? They were, before you boost them up, they were the Condorcet winner. That means in any one-on-one comparison, they will win, right? After you boost them up, I think, still going to win all those one-on-one comparisons, right? They're just going to like win even more because it's sort of like the plurality in this sense. When you make those one-on-one comparisons, they were on top of all of them. And if you boost them up, they're still going to be on top of all of them, all right? So the Condorcet also is satisfied. This is slightly more complicated, but I will say Condorcet also satisfies monotonicity. That instant runoff is actually the only one that doesn't, of the ones we've talked about so far. Satisfies monotonicity. I will try to explain. What I just said out loud was something like, if we have a Condorcet winner, and we boost them, then they still will win in any pairwise comparison. So they still win, which is the point of monotonicity. All right. So I'm going to put a check there by Condorcet. If we had a Condorcet winner and we boost them up on the ballots, they're still going to be the Condorcet winner because all you care about is those pairwise matchups, and they're just going to win. If anything, even more. All right. Any thoughts about that? Hold on. Sorry, my papers are all out of order here. Okay. There. All right. Okay. I'm with it now. This was the monotonicity criterion. Actually, I want to talk about another criterion right away. If you look at the chart so far, maybe I will refresh our memory about, we had the other two were majority and the Condorcet-Winner criterion, and these were, can I remember all of these? The majority, I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. The Condorcet-Winner was a bunch of X's with a check here. Actually, these were all X's in the Condorcet-Winner. And the majority had check, check, X, and check, I believe. Is that right? Yes, I think so. Nobody's complaining. Your charts are probably in a different order, so it's hard to say. People ask me, do we need to memorize the chart? My answer is no, but you should be able to think through any one of these things. If I asked you, say on a test or something, explain to me why this here is a check, or explain to me why this here is an X. You should be able to do that. Although I wouldn't suggest that you sit down and memorize the whole chart. I don't really have the chart memorized, but I'm capable of thinking through any one of them if I had to. All right. Actually today, I want to talk about two more criteria and one more voting system, although we may not get to the last criterion for today. But a very simple criterion. This is a very basic one about judging how good a voting system is. It's a little bit, I guess, vaguely like the majority criterion. Remember, the majority said if actually a majority of voters put a certain candidate in the top position, then they should win the election. This one is even more than a majority. It's called the Unanimity Criterion. The unanimity. That's the version of the word unanimous, right? The unanimity. It says actually, if it's unanimous, everybody feels a certain way, then the results should reflect that unanimous opinion. So this is about, it says, I'll just tell you, if all voters prefer some candidate X above Y, then, what can you say? In any kind of sane universe, if actually every single voter prefers X above Y, what should happen in the result?
X should win.
X should win, he said. Actually, this is a little trick question. Not really trick, but that's actually not what I'm going to write here. I'm going to write Y should not win. This is not exactly the same as saying X should win. The reason is because, for instance, if you had more than two candidates, if there were three of them, say, and everybody liked X better than Y, it doesn't necessarily mean that X should win, because maybe like Z should win. Maybe Z is like even better than X, right? But it definitely does mean that Y should not win. If everybody likes X better than Y, Y should not win. Let me just try and say that, what I just said parenthetically. It doesn't mean X should win necessarily, since there may be another even more popular candidate that should be the winner. But in any case, if everybody prefers X better than Y, then definitely Y should lose, right? That's the conclusion of the unanimity. It doesn't mean X should win, since there may be another even better candidate. But it definitely does mean that Y should lose. All right. This is called the Unanimity Criterion. And I would like to discuss our various systems here. This one I think is even is quite a bit easier. So let's put this on there. Unanimity, right? Sorry, my chart is in a different order than yours. That's all right. You're not supposed to memorize the chart anyway. You should be able to think about any of them, though. So let's think about the first position here, the plurality system and unanimity. Let's just talk it out here. Does the plurality system satisfy the unanimity? Imagine if you're using the plurality and everybody likes X better than Y, is it true that Y is going to lose? That's what the unanimity says. I think it's true that Y is going to lose. Why are they going to lose in a plurality election? Well, if everyone likes X better than Y, then Y will have no votes in the top position. So they're going to lose the plurality because plurality is about votes in the top position. So plurality does satisfy unanimity. If another candidate is above, if X is above Y, Y definitely cannot win. All right, what about the Condorcet? If it's unanimous that X is above Y, can Y be the Condorcet winner? The answer is no, because if it's unanimous that X is above Y, then Y is going to lose the comparison between Y and X and Y, and so they will not be the Condorcet winner. So that means the Condorcet is satisfied, the unanimity is satisfied by the Condorcet method. How about the Borda? If X is unanimously above Y, it means that X will have more points than Y when you do the Borda, and so Y cannot win the Borda election. So that's a check also. And then the instant runoff, if X is above Y unanimously, can Y win in the instant runoff? Can anyone explain? The answer is no. Y, if X is above Y unanimously, then Y cannot win the instant runoff. What do you think? Yeah, because Y will get eliminated, if anything, before X, right? And so Y is not going to win the election, right? Excellent. You got to say something in your reasoning about the instant runoff. You have to say something about the rounds or the elimination or whatever. And it's because Y, if X is unanimously above Y, Y is going to get eliminated before X. And so they're not going to win. All right, excellent. They're all unanimity. They all satisfy the unanimity. The unanimity is kind of a very, very basic, that any sort of reasonable voting system you feel like ought to satisfy the unanimity. Can I just say here, any system failing unanimity must be pretty bad, right? I feel like this unanimity principle is sort of a very, very basic thing that any reasonable kind of democracy-like system would satisfy. And if your system did not satisfy unanimity, I would be very suspicious of using it in the real world. Any system that doesn't satisfy that must be pretty suspicious, pretty sus, as my kids would say. All right. None of these four systems, plurality, Condorcet, Borda, instant runoff. I mean, you can say some people have opinions about which ones are better, but none of them are like obviously bogus, right? None of them are totally backwards. They're all vaguely democratic, and they all work kind of well in the real world, except the Condorcet. The Condorcet has checks everywhere, which is a great sign, although you have to remember, the Condorcet often does not choose a winner when you do this in a real election, and so it's not really usable in the real world, unfortunately, because it does have the checks everywhere. All right. Excellent. That's the unanimity. There's not a lot to say about it because it's so simple. All right. Let's talk about another voting method. Can you believe it? I'm going to put another row on this chart. Are we going too fast? We're just going from one thing to the next. Let's do it. Another method. Now this one is kind of stupid. It's something that you probably have become accustomed to this over your career as a person learning mathematics. Mathematicians actually sometimes like to talk about things which are kind of stupid. They are not terribly useful by themselves, but they are mathematically important. So I'm going to say this is a bit stupid. kind of like the number 0. The number 0. I don't know how little kids feel about the number 0 the first time you learn about the number 0, but the number 0 it's sort of like it doesn't mean anything, or it means nothing. Does that even count as a number? You have to wonder, philosophically speaking, what is supposed to count as a number? The answer to that question is, well, maybe it doesn't really represent any kind of quantity, but it's definitely useful as a number. You use 0 all the time, even though it doesn't really represent anything. This is what I mean by mathematicians sometimes like to talk about stupid things like the number 0, which by itself isn't actually representative of anything. But in the context, when you're talking about more complicated things, it is absolutely important. You really need to use 0 as if it were a real number, even though we all know it kind of doesn't represent anything. Anyway, this is a voting method that's like that. It is not one that is useful in the real world, but it is somehow like a vacuous or a degenerate kind of system. Anyway, it's called dictatorship. It actually is used in the real world, although it's not generally thought of as a voting system. But, there are places in the real world where they have dictatorships. All right? Here's how you do the dictatorship. Everybody knows how this works in the real world. Before the election, one of the voters is chosen to be the dictator. How do you choose them? Like whoever has the biggest guns or something. That, in the real world, the dictator is chosen by violence, usually, I guess. Anyway, before the election, one of the voters is chosen to be the dictator. And then you do the election. Everybody can vote if they want to. Whoever the dictator ranks first wins the election. All right. Let me just say parenthetically, all other votes are ignored. All right. This is called the dictatorship method. Something like this actually happens in the real world, where a country like North Korea will tell you that it's a democracy, and every so often they go out and vote. It's just that they all know who's going to win. Sometimes it's like there's only one candidate on the ballot, or sometimes it's like there's a guy with a big gun looking over your shoulder when you vote, and you better vote for the one that we all know is going to win. Anyway, the way that we describe the dictatorship as a voting system is just you count up all the votes, but it doesn't matter. The only vote that matters is the dictator's vote. And of course, in the real world, the dictator will generally vote for themselves. That's, I suppose, not always happens. All right. This is the dictatorship. So I'm going to put that on my chart up here. One way you could try to judge these systems is like against dictatorship. You could say, well, at least it's better than the dictatorship method, right? That one, the dictatorship method is one which is, universally agreed that that's not a democratic way of doing things, not the way that we want to do things in the real world. Anyway, which of these criteria are satisfied? Does it satisfy any of them? Maybe we'll think about, let's just try and sort of talk about each one. Actually, maybe, can I ask you guys to think about this? Talk to your friends about it. Does the dictatorship satisfy any of these? Or is it an X everywhere? I mean, you should expect X's here because the dictatorship is not a good democratic voting system. Think about it. Talk to your friends if you like, if you got them. If not, talk to your inner voice. See what you think. Put an X or a check in each of these spots here. And I'm going to walk around. You can talk to me if you want. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'll give you a few minutes. How's it going? Thoughts? Okay. Good. So a majority means the majority of people put the somebody on top. That's not How you guys
It's like if it satisfies it, it's checking it.
Yeah,
exactly. Method satisfies the system.
No, I didn't.
well, there's a check.
That's good.
How's it going?
It's good for me to know that. I like when I sign up.
Let's chat about these. I know I didn't make it all the way around. So let's just go across here. Now my chart is probably in a different order. How about majority? This one, this says that if a majority of the voters like, say, X above Y, then X should win the election. What do you think? Does the dictatorship satisfy? Yes or no? I see some head shakers. No. Yeah, no is correct. If a majority of the voters want some person rather than the other, that does not mean that that person's going to win if you're in a dictatorship. All that matters is who the dictator wants, not who the majority wants. So there's an X here. All right? Dictatorship does not satisfy the majority criterion. How about the Condorcet winner criterion? If somebody is the Condorcet winner, that means that they would win in any pairwise matchup. Does that mean they will be picked by the dictator? That's what you have to think about. I would say it does not mean they will be picked by the dictator. If someone's going to win majorities in any pairwise matchup, that doesn't mean that they are the person the dictator is going to choose, right? The dictator can choose whoever they want. And so the dictatorship does not satisfy the Condorcet winner criterion. Even if majorities prefer this or that, the dictator might choose somebody totally different. All right. How about, I think I'm trying to do these in the order that maybe you likely have them in your chart. How about the monotonicity? Remember, this means if you had a winner and you boost them up, are they still going to be the winner? So you have to imagine, if you do this and you had some winner, that is, somebody that the dictator picked, and then you recount the votes, but you boost that person up on some of the ballots, are they still going to be the winner? I think the answer is yes, they are. If the dictator chose them sort of before you change any votes, and then you change some votes to raise them up, they're still going to win because the dictator is still going to choose them. Like these boosting the votes has no effect in a dictatorship election because all that matters is one person's vote, the dictator. So there's a check here, actually. All right. Does that mean the dictatorship? Hey, it's actually maybe not so bad. No, it's just, it happens to satisfy this one mathematical criterion. That doesn't make it good. It is a check right there. All right? And then the dictatorship and unanimity. That means if everybody prefers X above Y, then is it possible for Y to win the election in a dictatorship? The answer to what I just said is no. Actually, if everybody prefers X above Y, then Y cannot win. Y will not be picked even by the dictator because the unanimity is about all the voters, including the dictator, right? And if you say all the voters prefer X above Y, that means in particular, specifically the dictator prefers X above Y, so Y is not the winner. So actually there's a check here also. All right? Maybe I'll try and write something about that specifically because that one is maybe a little counterintuitive. Dictatorship does satisfy unanimity. Again, this doesn't mean it's good. It's just, that's one, I suppose, one thing that's good about it. Dictatorship does satisfy unanimity, since if all voters prefer X above Y, then in particular, that means that the dictator prefers X above Y, because the dictator is counted as one of the voters. So if all voters prefer X above Y, then the dictator prefers X above Y. And so Y will not win. And that's why the unanimity is satisfied, right? Unanimity means if all voters prefer X above Y, then Y will not win. And this actually is true in a dictatorship, because the dictator counts as one of the voters. All right. So the dictatorship is a bad method. It's a bad method in the real world. It's not democratic. You wouldn't want to actually do this in the real world, I suppose, unless you're the dictator or the dictator's mom or something. Life is good for the dictator, usually. But it's an important example, first of all, because, like I said, mathematicians like to try and test the boundaries of the definitions. Just like the number 0 is not terribly interesting by itself, but it's useful as a tool. It's useful as a thing you use to compare with other things. The dictatorship is a similar thing. And the fact that you have 2 checks and 2 X's here should remind us that just because you get a check somewhere or an X somewhere doesn't really mean that it's a good or bad system to use in the real world. These are just a few different ways of evaluating these systems, which can sort of help us to judge them in the real world, but these checks and X's shouldn't be regarded as somehow ironclad evidence that something is or is not a good system. All right. Great. We got 15 minutes. I think that's enough time to introduce the next criterion. I'll put it on the chart right away. It's called IIA. This is actually the last of the voting criteria that we're going to talk about. It has this abbreviation, IIA. Let's talk about it. The full name of this, I'll just tell you the name, although I'm going to take a few minutes to explain all of this. Independence from irrelevant alternatives. And this is called IIA. The abbreviation. Independence from irrelevant alternatives. This is also, similar to monotonicity, this is also about what happens if somebody changes their votes in a certain way. And in particular, this one is not about boosting the winner. It's about making a change which is irrelevant from the point of view of the winner. So this is about making irrelevant changes from the point of view of the winner. The idea is, this is a vague idea, if you make an irrelevant change on somebody's vote, then that should not affect who wins the election. All right, so this is about making irrelevant changes from the point of view of the winner, and these should not change the outcome. All right, this is the irrelevant alternatives criterion. And I want to show in an example, a specific example of how these irrelevant changes might look. So here is a specific example. What I just said is not quite a definition just yet, because I didn't say exactly what I mean by irrelevant, but that's what I'm going to get to. Here's an example. Let's say, this is a simple example. 3 people said ABC, and 2 people said BCA. And let's say we use Borda. So first of all, let's decide who's going to win, and then I'm going to say, well, what if we change this? Then who's going to win? But we got to figure out who wins to begin with. So with these votes as is, we got to add up the Borda points. By the way, I graded the quizzes. I don't know if you checked them out. Check them out. I graded the quizzes. Most people did great. In fact, I graded it was out of 10 points. The median score was 10 out of 10. That means more than half of you got 10 out of 10. So congratulations to more than half of you. I tried to make the questions very straightforward. You know, if you remember how to do it, you did it, and you got it right. So please let me know if you have questions about it. I'd be happy to go over it. Anyway, this one I'm going to use the Borda. So remember the points for the Borda go 0, 1, 2. And we add and multiply to do the Borda. So for A, it's going to be 3 times 2 plus 2 times 0. That's 6. For B, it's going to be 3 times 1 plus 2 times 2. That's 3 plus 4, which is 7. And for C, it's going to be 3 times 0 plus 2 times 1. That's 2. So B wins with the election as written. All right? What? Sorry, I'm just realizing I did it wrong on my paper. That's all right. That's fine. Here's the irrelevant change. All right. What if we change? What if we change BCA to BAC? All right. This counts as an irrelevant change because from the point of view of the winner, we haven't changed anything. These voters, they are still putting B on the top. B was the winner. They changed their mind, but they didn't change anybody's ranking relative to the winner. So let me just say, what if we change BCA to BAC? I will say, parenthetically, this changes nobody's ranking with respect to the winner, which was B. Right? All I did was shuffle around the losers. That's why this is called irrelevant. I'll say that in quotes because we're going to see, actually this, if you're using Borda, this does change the result of the election. So it turns out not to be irrelevant after all when you're doing the election using the Borda. But that's what is meant by the word irrelevant because I am changing the losers around, but I haven't actually made any changes with respect to the winner. B is still ranked above the other two. I just shuffled the losers. Anyway, what do we get though? The new results, if you recount the election, I will just draw the chart again. 3 said ABC, and 2 said, it used to say BCA, but I'm changing it to BAC, all right? Actually, we will have a different winner now if we do the Borda again. Now we get A has 3 times 2 plus 2 times 1, which is 7. No, 8. 8, right? B has 3 times 1 plus 2 times 2. That's 7. C has 0. straight up 0. All right? And so now A wins. All right? This is how, in some systems, such as the Borda, you can make a so-called irrelevant change, but it actually does change the outcome of the election. All right? So we didn't actually change B's ranking with respect to anybody else. But this changed the outcome of the election. All right. And there's something kind of weird about this. All right. This seems like it shouldn't happen in a real system. That if you make irrelevant changes to people's votes, you feel like that should end up being irrelevant. All right. This is the idea behind the IIA. So maybe I'll write sort of the official definition of the irrelevant alternatives criterion. I'll write it all out one last time. Independence from irrelevant alternatives criterion. It says a good voting system should be independent from such changes. That is, it should not matter if you do one of these irrelevant changes. That's what this word independence indicates. So it says, if there is a winner, I don't really want to talk about ties or whatever in the context of IIA, but if there is a winner and we change ballots without adjusting anyone's ranking relative to the winner, then the winner doesn't change. All right. This is called the independence from irrelevant alternatives, which, like I said, I'm always going to write IIA from now on. If you had a winner and then you make a change on the ballots which doesn't actually modify anybody's opinion relative to the winner, then the winner should still win. This change should not affect the outcome of the election. So in our example that we just saw, it was with the Borda, but B won, and then we changed BCA to BAC. That should have been an irrelevant change because B was already the winner, and all we did was shuffle around the losers. Nobody, these votes, C and A were both below B, and then we changed it, and still C and A were both below B. That's what I mean by without adjusting anyone's ranking relative to the winner. These two were below the winner. They are still both below the winner. This was, and I will say in quotes, irrelevant change. All right. I say in quotes because actually we know it in fact was relevant. It did change the outcome of the election, but from the point of view of the IIA, that's not really supposed to make a difference. That shouldn't change the outcome, but it did. All right. And so this means, we used Borda for that particular example. That means Borda does not satisfy the independence from irrelevant alternatives because you can make one of these weird changes which you feel like shouldn't make any difference, but actually it does make a difference. So I'm going to scroll back up to there. Put an X in that column. Borda does not satisfy the IIA. And we're going to go through these other ones and talk about them. But for now, I just want to say one thing to get a little specific. Here is a subtle point before we leave. about the changes. The change that we're talking about is not supposed to modify anybody's ranking relative to the winner. So the IIA change must not modify any ranking relative to the winner. Like, for example, in that example we had before, BAC changing to BCA. Actually, it was the other way around. Doesn't really matter, but it was BCA, where B was the winner, changing to BAC, right? This was irrelevant, an irrelevant change, because they were both below the winner, and they're still both below the winner, all right? I do not mean that you just didn't move the B. This is the subtlety. Sometimes you can make one of these changes. So this is one of these irrelevant changes, right? But sometimes the B can stay where it is, but you can still make a change which actually is not irrelevant in this sense. This is the subtlety. If you had something like ABC like this, and B was the winner, and you change it to CBA, this actually doesn't count as an irrelevant change. Even though I didn't move the winner, I still did rearrange the rankings of A and C relative to the winner, right? It used to be that C was below the winner. Now C is above the winner. This actually, you would expect this to change the outcome of the election, because you moved someone who was doing worse than the winner up to someone who is now doing better than the winner. So this change is not, this doesn't count as irrelevant, because you did actually change someone's positioning relative to the winner. All right. I think maybe that'll do for today. More about the IIA next time.